What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Swagcast. Today, I'm hella excited to finally get Tim Elliott on, a UFC fighter with over 30 pro fights, a loving father, and a potential flat earther. What's going on, Tim? How we doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Sorry we got cut off the other day, but I'm happy to be here.
No. It was that the other day was good because I was super nervous the first like 5 minutes of that episode. However, we're into it now. So I want to jump right into it. I first got acquainted with you in 2016. I started watching fighting in about 15, 16, and then Ultimate Fighter. I believe it was Ultimate Fighter 24. You won to face Demetrius Johnson in the finals. And that was also an absolute stacked class of the Ultimate Fighter. And I still to this day say you beat Demetrius.
Yeah, man. It's kind of a funny situation with the Ultimate Fighter. The UFC had just fired me, so I had just gotten fired by the UFC. I felt like I kind of got in early. I wasn't really ready. My first fight in the UFC, I fought John Dodson, which he was the number one guy in the world. He just knocked out T.J. Dillashaw, so like he was in my eyes he was the best guy in the division. I lost that first fight, and then I lost a couple in a row, and the UFC let me go. And then it wasn't that long after the UFC let me go. I hit up my manager and asked, I like I said, should I try out for this Ultimate Fighter thing? Like, I feel like that's a way to get back in. And my manager was like, man, don't waste your time with the Ultimate Fighter. They're putting all these other guys in. Like, you're gonna get back in the Ultimate or in the UFC just by waiting around. So I didn't want to wait around, so I just jumped back on the Ultimate Fighter show. I think they thought that I didn't really have a chance at winning it because they had just fired me, and like the last thing they want is the old guy that they just fired to come on the show with a bunch of young champions and win. So I kind of stirred things up. Like my first fight back in the UFC after being fired, I fought for a world title. So that's a pretty strange like line of events, but I mean it worked out really well for me, minus losing to Demetrius. And again, like I feel like I did win the fight portion of that fight, but he's just so much better than me and so much smarter than me. Like he just outsmarted me. Like I'm a good fighter, but I'm not a real smart fighter, and I like to fight, but I'm not a martial artist. And he outsmarted me and out martial arted me.
Yeah, Demetrius's IQ is absolutely on point. Even in fights now, you see him in one championships.
Yeah.
However, not too long after that championship fight, you go on a 3-fight losing streak. However, that's not a bad thing because all three of those guys end up being top 5 contenders. Like Figgy and Brandon Royval, absolute studs. Can you kind of talk about like how it is to lose to a young fighter, but then see him become such a star?
Well, with Brandon Raval, it was different because I knew the guy. I know his team. I know all the Factory X guys. I know how good he is. Like he's a legit fighter. He's a legit gangster. It was during a time during the pandemic where they weren't really letting people go, and like I was in Vegas and I never got COVID, so like they were using me to fight a lot, and they weren't firing anybody, so it took a lot of pressure off. But at the same time, I wasn't allowed to train. All the gyms were shut down,
Mm-hmm.
so like whenever originally I was going to fight, I had a ranked guy and I was excited about, and then the fight fell through, and I was going to get another guy. My management team in the UFC was like, "Oh, we can't let you fight that guy. He's not ranked." And I was like, "All right, well, it's I'm only getting to fight who can fight during the pandemic." And then Brandon Reval popped up, and they were like, "Oh, we want you to fight this guy," and I was like, "Well, he's not ranked either." You know what I mean? But the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, like they always tell you like the UFC matchmakers and shit will tell you like, oh, you can't fight this guy, he's unranked, unless they need you to fight, and then it doesn't really matter. So with the Brandon Reval fight, I thought it was a good fight for me. The problem is I wasn't like the way I like to fight is go as hard as I can for as long as I can, and I did that in the Reval fight. The problem was is I only had 2 rounds in me. After 2 rounds, I was completely spent, and like you could look over at Brandon, and Brandon Reval was completely fine. So
Fresh.
that was kind of a tough part. God damn, this game ready keeps fucking up. It was a little bit of a tough spot, you know, not being able to train, but at the same time, like so many guys that were out of state or out of country, they weren't able to fight at all because everything was happening here in Las Vegas. So people were having to get vaccinated or not able to leave their country. So although I did lose several fights in a row, it was a really good time for my career because I got to fight often and I got to fight a lot. And it didn't really matter if I was winning and losing. The UFC needed guys to fight, and they were like letting people know, like, "Hey, we're not going to fire you. Like, so take whatever fights you can." So I did that, and man, during the pandemic were two of the best years of my life in the UFC. I made more money during the pandemic than I ever had before. Um, so it was kind of nice. It was, you know, MMA is different than the NFL. They can have NFL teams that lose for seasons that never get wins, and people still support them and love them. But in the UFC, if you win or if you lose two fights in a row, like people that you thought were your friends will, message you how bad you suck.
Well, I feel like MMA is a little bit more lenient towards losing versus like boxing. Like
Oh yeah,
if you lose in boxing, like the world switched on Devin Haney when he lost to Ryan Garcia, and Ryan Garcia was on every drug known to man. So like,
yeah,
and the world switched on him. But like MMA, where I feel like it's a little different because the guy could lose like one, two, three times, and maybe they're blaming the IV bags from the other guy, but usually, the fans usually back the fighters. And speaking
yeah.
of fans backing the fighters, that brings me to my next point. So if we fast forward to 2023, you're on a 2-fight win streak, and you break the news on the internet about about your ex marriage, and after that news comes out, the entire MMA community is backing you. They want to see Muhammad get knocked out. They're ready for the Tim Elliott show. Can you kind of go on how nice it felt to have the entire community backing you, and maybe any nice regards any fighters have given you or anything like that during that time?
Man, it was weird because like I usually use Twitter or Instagram to talk shit online or promote fights. It's
Mm.
hardly ever personal stuff. I usually if I'm going to post something about my daughter or my family, it's usually on Facebook. Um, but yeah, man, I don't know what I was doing or what I was looking for, but I know like I was in a bad spot and I needed to do something. So whenever I released that information, I didn't know what it was going to do, and I didn't know how it was going to affect me. But the overwhelming amount of support was unbelievable. I got not just from not just from other fighters, but other fans, other athletes from other sports, just regular people on Instagram messaging me, telling me like how they went through similar situations, and like how it sounds kind of corny, but how things are going to get better, and things do get better, and things do pass. And I don't want to say that everything happens for a reason because that seems kind of morbid. Like I don't know the reason behind things, but I know things tend to work out the way that they're supposed to. And, it ended up being a really positive in my life. I wouldn't have thought that, a couple years ago. I thought that was the end. Um, but luckily I have a great family. I have a great daughter. I have, overwhelming support from the MMA community that I didn't really know. Like, literally people, like, I look at my comments and shit, like 5 comments ago these guys were messaging me like, "Oh, I hate you, stupid faggot," to like, "Oh man, I'm sorry about you and your wife." I'm like, okay, wow, what a weird turn. But I don't know, man. I It was nice. That's one good thing about being around the MMA game for so long. It's not that I'm one of the best, but I've been in a long time. I've created a little bit of a fan base. I've developed relationships with the UFC staff and the other UFC alumni, to where, like, man, it ended up being a really really good thing in my life, and helped me, I think, in my career and as a person, and definitely as a father.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you seem to be in a much better state now, like a much well, the entire time you seem to be in a very like healthy state even during the fight. Which you did unfortunately lose by arm triangle, but your next fight right after that you took on short notice, you finished that fight with the arm triangle. Was that planned in any way? Like, I lost via arm triangle, I need to get it back.
No, man, not really. It's so funny because like during that Muhammad Makav fight, I felt really, really great. Camp went well. The weight cut was awesome. I wasn't able to take my head coach, Chris Brennan. He got really bad COVID during the pandemic, and he lost like a big chunk of his lung percentage. So he's not able to fly. So I literally flew to Abu Dhabi with my girlfriend, and one of my other friends and cornermen. And you know, although we didn't get the win, man, it was a really good experience. Muhammad Makaev is awesome. Like
Hmm.
him and I, like we do it right. Like we were like rivals and talking shit to each other. But then when we see each other, like we're friends and we respect each other, and like that's how the game is supposed to. And I've been that way with everybody. Like any beef that I've ever had with any of my people that I'm fighting, for the most part, was just manufactured. We're friends. Like we'll talk shit in the hallways, like when we're walking by and stuff. Like
Hmm.
it's never an angry thing. But man, if I was gonna lose to somebody, I would just soon it be to a guy like Muhammad Makaev. That guy, he lives the fighter lifestyle. Um, he doesn't waste any time. He's a young guy. He's a good dude. So you know, that loss sucked, but if I'm gonna lose to somebody, those are the guys I want to lose to. I don't mind being considered the gatekeeper. Like I'm to the point now in my career, I'm just lucky to have fights and lucky to be here. I want the UFC to use me if as a guy. Like if you can't beat Tim Elliott, then you shouldn't be in the UFC. That's fair. I think that's a fair assessment. And yeah, my arm triangle in my next fight with Sumadarji, it's weird. My friend James Krause, I haven't talked to him in a while, but he messaged me and he was like, "Oh, you're gonna arm triangle this guy in the first round." And I was like, "I've never arm triangled anybody in the UFC. I've never submitted anybody in an arm triangle in a jiu-jitsu match." And then as soon as the fight was over, sure enough, I called James, like, "Bro, like, how did you know that?" And he's like, "I just knew." He's just a smart dude. But yeah, man, that short notice fight with Sumadarji really helped my career. It kept me in the UFC. It got me a new contract. I got me a fight of the night bonus. So like now I'm, you know, 2 wins on my new contract and 2 fight of the night bonuses on my new contract, I think, as well. So um like this is the best my career has gone in years.
Yeah, it's looking really good right now. You're on a 2 fight win streak. You're number 9 ranked in the world in your division, and you recently were telling Paul Felder that you don't know if there's a championship chase. You don't know if that's behind you or not. Why don't you know if that's behind you? I feel like it's right there in front of you.
I think it's just goals. Like it's not that I mean, forever my goal was like, got to be a UFC champion. I want to be a UFC champion. I'm in this to be a UFC champion. And like now, I'm just happy with being a UFC fighter. I'm happy with being a UFC athlete. I'm making enough money to support my family with just fighting. So like before, I wanted to be the champion of the world, but mostly I wanted to be the champion of the world so that I could provide for my family.
Hmm.
Um, Now I'm able to do that. I'm making enough money now by, you know, I got a good management team. I've created good relationships with Dana White and Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby. Like I don't ask those guys for anything. I When they tell me to do something, I keep my mouth shut and I do it. They tell me to show up and fight, like weigh in, I'm there. Like I want to be that guy. So it's hard to be that guy and focus on being the champion. I want to be a company man now, and well, it's going to be hard because I have this knee injury. But also, like you said, I'm ranked 9 in the world. I'm going to be out for 9 months with this knee injury. Like my status in the flyweight division is going to go way down. So I'll be back at the bottom of the barrel trying to fight back, you know, to this 9 position spot here in a year. So, you know, I don't want to count out being a title run, but man, I'm really enjoying my spot in the UFC. I'm really enjoying fighting. I'm getting a lot of time with my family. I'm making enough money to survive. Like my goals have just kind of changed. I am a fighter. That's what I want to do. It doesn't matter if it's a world title fight or in the Denny's bathroom. Like I'm gonna fight somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to talk about the surgery, you recently had surgery. I believe it was on your knee.
Yep, ACL again, right knee.
And did that happen in camp training for the next fight?
Yeah, I was fighting for Tiara Tayatsu, and they first they told me that I wasn't going to get that fight, and then which I was surprised when they offered me that fight because I know he's a young up and coming guy, and I thought a smarter fight with him would be another young up and coming guy. But again, like you know, if you can't beat me, then you probably shouldn't be in the UFC. So I lucked into the fight. That's the fight I wanted. That's the fight I asked for. He accepted the fight, no problem. Then they bumped us to the main event, and I was all excited, like, oh man, I'm gonna get a main event slot. And the UFC like embedded. I don't know if it was embedded or what, but the UFC people came to film, and when they came to film, like I got planted during training, and I felt my knee go out, and I didn't want to say anything because I wasn't really sure. So I trained the rest of the day, and then the UFC people were like, "Oh, hey, we want you to come down to the lake and film. We're gonna do some like shots of you looking out into the lake." And I knew I was hurt, and I didn't really want to do it, but I wasn't 100%. So I was like, "Yeah, let's go, no problem." So I go down with the UFC like embedded people down to the lake, and they're trying to they drive down this truck down to the lake where I'm staying at, and they get the truck stuck. So I'm out there with these guys for like 2 hours in the mud, like digging, trying to get this, and I'm hurt at the same time, and like these guys have no idea. And then finally afterwards, like, all right, we're gonna take these pictures, and I'm all muddy and sweaty, and I was like, bro, I was like, my fucking knees hurt, like I'm out of here. Like I didn't even help them get the truck out. Like they had to call tow truck and get out of there. I was done at that point, and then went and had my MRI, and my cadaver from my old surgery had came loose. Some of my hardware came out, so they just replaced my hardware and tightened my cadaver. It's all orthoscopic. It's not like they didn't have to do a big long cut on me, and should be 8 or 9 months, and I'll be back ready to go.
So now the 8 or 9 months, I assume that only like 2 to 3 of those months will be like bed rest and physical therapy, and then getting right
Yeah,
into training.
I mean, my very first surgery, like I was stayed in bed for like a couple weeks, and then like man, it killed me. This surgery, I walked out of surgery and went straight to the UFC Performance Institute and started getting therapy on it. Heather Linden was working on my knee like 10 hours after I had surgery, like getting it bending, like getting some of the fluid out of there. So, um, yeah, I mean, I would think I would be back to training in, you know, 3 or 4 months. I'll be back to, training pretty easy and light.
So the UFCPI, a lot of fighters like kind of praise the UFCPI, and some fighters will hate it at first, and then they'll praise it afterwards. And I believe the UFCPI is still pretty new, like only 5 or 6 years old. How do you personally feel about the UFCPI?
I'm a little indifferent to it now because like I was here in Vegas before I was in the UFC before the PI. I was in the UFC. Fuck, I was in the UFC before Conor McGregor. I was in the UFC before USADA was in the UFC. I was in the UFC during the TRT days. So um, when the UFC PI started becoming a thing, like I moved to Vegas right away
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to be. It's hard to feel like I've been in the UFC for a long time, and even as a professional fighter, it's hard to feel like a professional athlete. Like you don't, you rarely as a professional fighter feel like Michael Jordan. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or like somebody really popular. But man, whenever the PI got built, I felt like we have a place. We have a place where fighters can come and feel like Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I go there and I can get a massage and I can get a free meal and like you know physical training. I can it's nice. It's the only place where a UFC fighter or any fighter can come and like you feel like a professional athlete. You go in there and you're like, oh, this is what it feels like to be in the MLB, or this is what it feels like to be in the NFL. So it's at first I loved it, and then now I'm kind of bitter at it, and don't care as much about it because I'm not here and I don't get to use it every day. I'm like, now that I'm not there every day, I'm like, oh, it's not fair. But it's an amazing facility, and like even for me, I wouldn't be able to go and trust any other physical therapist right after surgery to mess with my knee. Like there's a risk of infection, and like a lot can happen right after surgery, and I wouldn't go anywhere else or trust anybody else to do those things. But Heather came from the Olympic Training Center
Mm-hmm.
straight to the UFC Performance Institute. Like we have the best physical therapists and some of the best doctors in the world right here, at our fingertips. The problem is you have to use it, and it's open to every UFC fighter. You just have to get here and pay to be able to use it. And man, it's top notch. It really is.
So are you going to be in Vegas throughout the entire recovery, or do you think you'll probably go back home little halfway through?
I actually leave on the 19th to go back home.
Oh, okay.
Because I have a kid. My daughter just got back from Disney World, so she's been back for 2 days now. She's just waiting on me. So I get back on the 19th, and then I'll just fly back and forth. I have my post-op doctor's appointment here on the 18th to kind of see if they say everything is good. Then I'm going to fly home on the 19th. If not, then I'll stay and keep doing physical therapy until they tell me that I'm okay to fly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on to my next question. I get a lot of shit for using you in UFC 5 still. I was actually using you yesterday and I went 1 and 2 with you, not too bad, but the one fight I did win with you, I used a foam finger. I had a foam finger on the hand, so that's pretty impressive. The other 2 fights, I got robbed. That's all EA's fault. However, I like to use you in UFC because you're very fun to use because you have that awkward style and you even see it in your actual fights. That awkward style, you stand kind of different, and you're just wild with it. Can you kind of explain how that came to fruition? Did you kind of just go right from that to basics, or did you start fighting like that?
Man, when I first started fighting, my pro career, I didn't have any amateur fights. My pro career, I started out with 0 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. And like I felt like I was good, but I didn't have a style. I was trying to be traditional. I was trying to, be a martial artist, and like my wrestling style wasn't a good wrestling style. I was fighting guys. That was how I was winning wrestling matches. Was I wasn't really wrestling. I was fighting. So um, then I was trying to be like a technical fighter, which didn't make any sense because I wasn't a technical wrestler. But I went and helped Dominic Cruz get ready for Scott Young Gun Jorgensen. It would have been in like 2010, and I still was 0-3-1, I think, but I was a good wrestler. I was a national champion, so they brought me out to train with Dominic Cruz for Scott Jorgensen, and I stayed in his gym for a couple months. And Dominic Cruz I mean, he just passed me around, and like I was his bitch. Like it was no fun to go in there and spar him. He would just, and like he had fresh guys coming in on him every round, so it wasn't like I was tired. I would come in fresh, and he would just kick the shit out of me. And finally, after like months of this getting worked over by Dominic Cruz, I was like, man, I was like, fuck this. I'm gonna start mimicking him. I'm gonna start being awkward and like quit trying to block punches and just move out of the way, because I would block something, but it would still, like, it would hit my arms and that would hit my head. And I was, even though it didn't hurt, I'm like, that's getting hit. I'm getting hit every time I block.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, really was kind of just making fun of Dominic Cruz while I was sparring him. And then all of a sudden I was like, fuck, he's not hitting me as much. He's not taking me down as much. Um, I'm missing punches. I'm fucking landing takedowns. So just one sparring session changed everything. I completely started trying to mimic him. And then, obviously my movement is not quite like his. His is pretty special. Mine is just different, but I've started just moving just to move. And then like finally after, a year or so of training, then I was moving with a purpose. And now like I've developed my own style, and it's nice. And I have to tell people all the time, like, I'm not a martial artist. I'm a fighter, and I'm out there to fight. And there's no wrong way to hit somebody in the face, and there's no wrong way not to get hit in the face. So, man, as soon as I started doing that, and then I started winning, and then I started having fun, and it really opened it up. It quit being like this thing that I was doing and started becoming this thing that I love to do. And it just opened up a ton of doors for me. And really that all came from Dominic Cruz, is me just being a shithead and trying to, I was making fun of him being a dork, and then it started working, and I was like, oh shit, I'm onto something here. And, that's what it took to change my career around.
So you keep bringing up that you started your career at 0-3-1, which is insane because most people that start 0-3-1 would either give it up there or most likely just never make the UFC at this point. You then go into sparring with Dominic Cruz, which is a massive opportunity as it is. And then did you come right out and get your first couple wins right after you kind of switched your style with Dominic?
Yeah, I think I won like 9 in a row after that. And one of those was Jens Pulver. And
Mm-hmm.
so I fought Josh Rave, was the first guy I ever fought at, or sorry, I fought Jens Pulver at 35. And that was a big step up, and it was really scary for me because like I watch highlight reels on every other guy that I fought, and they had like 3 fights. But then you watch, a highlight reel on Jens Pulver, and he's knocking out the best guys in the world at 155 pounds, beating guys like BJ Penn. And I I've never been scared really going into a fight, and I didn't think I was scared going into this fight. But man, whenever they announced Jens Pulver and he starts walking out, like I just felt my chest like wrap around my feet, and I was like, oh fuck, man, like this dude's scary. And boy, it took a round or so to get that out of me. And then I always looked up to Jens Pulver, and then got the opportunity to fight him and then knock Jens Pulver out, um, immediately like turned my career around. That put me at like 8 fights in a row. And then I was fighting my first fight at 125 pounds, and Jens Pulver was actually commentating that fight and saying like during the commentation like how he would like to get a rematch with me potentially because we were fighting for RFA at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I threw a spinning back kick on Josh Rave. He was the first ranked guy I ever fought at flyweight, and Josh shot in at the same time. Well, I didn't know what had hit him, but he went down, and I caught him in a Dars in like seconds. So I subbed him really fast, and then Jens Pulver on the commentary was like, "Oh, probably not going to fight him now. He's going to the UFC." Well, I talked to Josh Rave afterwards. I didn't know what had happened. I thought that he just quit. But when I did my spinning back kick, I missed, and he shot, and my ass cheek hit him in the chin, and it knocked him out. I thought I pulled a butt cheek because my butt was sore, but it was his chin that hit my butt, and it rocked him, and he fell right into a Dars. So I got lucky and beat like a ranked flyweight, and then that fight immediately put me at 9-0 or 9 in a row. I knew that the UFC was going to be calling at some point, but I didn't really know when.
Mm-hmm.
My dad and I were in San Francisco partying after that fight. We were we were at Hippie Hill in San Francisco at a Alanis Morissette concert, tripping on mushrooms and talking about potential matchups in the UFC and what he thought my worst matchup in the UFC would be. And he was like, "Man, I think for you, your worst match in the UFC would be John Dodson for sure." And then maybe 4 hours later, the next morning, like because it was late, the next morning I get a call from my manager asking if I wanted to fight short notice John Dodson. I had 6 days to get to New Jersey and make weight and fight John Dodson. So me and my dad like sobered up and then got on an airplane and flew to New Jersey, and then I fought John Dodson, and I was in 2012. I've been in the UFC, probably my best fight, and I've been in the UFC ever since.
Yeah, no, you're going on like 10 years in this run. Just this run alone, you're going on 10 years. You are a UFC legend at this point.
I love it.
So now I want to get to the fun stuff because when we had set this whole thing up, you were like talking about flat earthing and all of this stuff. So are you a flat earther?
It's funny because I like to get into it on the internet, and it started as just me getting on there and saying shit to make people triggered, and then like I'll get in these like year-long battles with people over Twitter that it's just silliness. But man, the flat earth thing, it just started because if you say anything about it, man, it gets like people just get really really upset, and I didn't really understand it. And then like I started thinking about it, and it wasn't really a flat earth thing. It was like I feel like everywhere around you people try to tell you not to trust your senses, like
Mm-hmm.
that like I know like we're on this globe and we're spinning sideways at so many miles per hour this way while rotating around the sun so many thousands of miles per hour this way while shooting through the fucking galaxy. And like I don't know if that's true or not, but what it feels like to me is when I go outside and I put my feet in the grass and I look up at the sun, it feels to me like I'm the center of the universe and everything is revolving around me. And boy, that really made a lot of people upset. And that's their it always goes back to like, oh, trust the science, and like you don't understand geometry and you don't understand the math. And I'm like, I don't. First of all, you tell me that the sun is billions of miles away, and like that just sounds made up to me. Like even a billion miles, like I think a billion seconds is like 33 years or more. So like when you tell me something is a billion miles away, it makes me think that you're full of shit, because how would you even calculate that? One, it would take you 30 years at least to figure out that, even if it was just in seconds, which again, it didn't really start out as me being a flat earther. It started out as me like shit talking people just because they would get so upset if you said the earth was flat. And then the more I started thinking about it and the more I started looking into it, the more it started making sense to me. And again, I don't want to get into science and trying to convince people that I'm smart, because I'm not. I mean, I'm a guy, I have 2 college degrees. I have almost 9 years of schooling. I've never had a job. I've never worked a day in my life. I have zero fucking skills. Literally, the only thing that I'm good at is being a dad and fighting. And like we know, I'm pretty subpar at fighting. So uh, the flat Earth thing just came about with just me like upsetting people on Twitter, and then like man, they got so upset. And then seeing like the moon landing shit, it just looks so fake to me. And that's again, it's like people tell you like you can't trust your eyes, you can't trust your senses. Like, oh, that looks fake. That's only because you don't understand science and you don't understand. I'm like,
Nah.
all right, I don't like to get into it with people because I can't argue. Like, being a dumbass, it's hard to argue anything about like science or being smart. I just want to argue about what I feel. And like, man,
Yeah.
you're taught not to trust your instincts. You're taught like you don't trust what you feel. You trust these numbers that these people have been fucking telling you since you was a baby. And like, if you question that, then you're then you're some kind of idiot. And I just did it to piss people off at first, and now like the more I feel it, the more I do any research, the more it just makes me think that, I don't want to say the Earth is flat, but this is the center of the fucking whole galaxy right here. The Earth is so amazing and so special. Like, you can't convince me that we're insignificant and that the shit that we're doing here doesn't matter because there's a million other places just like this flying through the galaxy. Like, I just don't buy that.
You versus Bryce, you and Bryce Mitchell could be like UFC's first tag team.
Oh,
Like, like,
but Bryce tries to argue a bunch of like numbers and science and shit, and I don't want to even act like I'm about what I feel, and like I can go put my feet in the grass and look up at the sun and tell you that that's not 32 billion miles away.
yeah.
I don't care what the fuck you say. I don't care how many science degrees you have. Like, I can feel it. I can see it. Like, how could I see 32 billion miles? Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But again, the big part of that is like, I don't know, like something about upsetting somebody on the internet thousands of miles away without, losing the money because they bet on me in a fight. Uh, that it just, I don't know. It brings me joy.
I do also think the moon landing was fake as hell. And now that you brought it up, that actually brings up a really good point. When people do gamble on you, does that make you kind of like if you were to see a post like, I put $100,000 on Tim Elliott, would that make you feel like, I gotta knock this guy out, or like do you just kind of shove it off, like you don't give a fuck, that's their money that they're throwing away?
It has no effect on me, but I mean, not anymore. We can't. But there's been times like, after my coach Robert Follis passed away, and I had a fight that my guy didn't show up to weigh-ins in Canada. Well, they got me a short notice fight in Vegas like 2 weeks after, and it was at 135. Uh, and like I was kind of in a rough time because my coach just died, and also I was drinking a lot and like just being an asshole. But like I bet my whole show money on myself to win. So that was my biggest payday at one time. I won like 20 grand to win, and then I bet 20 grand on myself to win. So then I won that, and I think I even picked the fight to go the distance. Like, I don't know how to gamble, but I won like, I don't know, 25, $30,000 on myself, which was more than I had ever made before. And I was like, oh my God, like this is like this is another way to make money. And then, lost betting on myself one time, and then after that, I was like, never again, like not doing that again. But now, you're not allowed to do that. Like, not only can I not bet on myself or any other fights, like my family's not supposed to bet on fights, or my friends are not supposed to bet on fights.
Yeah.
So, which is good because I'm terrible at gambling. Um, but yeah, I bet on myself a couple of times and won. But I bet on myself once and lost, and I was like, I'm not doing that no more.
The, besides, so I know that rule is like within the last 3 years because of some crazy stuff that happened with all of the gambling. Where do you know of any other situations where like people are gambling on themselves and like making big? Because Joe Rogan always brings this shit up. Joe Rogan's always like, "Oh, everybody should be able to gamble on themselves. That makes the sport better." But like in some cases that could tear the sport down a little bit. I'm actually happy they made this rule a couple of years back.
Well, the thing with the rule is, it's like you can still do it. It's
Mm,
just if you get caught, it can get you in trouble. For me, it doesn't really matter because, again, I'm in there just for fighting and not. But you're right. It could be like if I could bet on myself to win, what would stop me from picking the round to where I'd bet on myself to lose? That's where thing could get can get tricky. But again, like I'm not a good enough fighter or athlete to do that either. I wouldn't trust myself to be like, all right, we're gonna go down in the second. Like I don't know if I got that in me. So it doesn't really affect me with the gambling thing. I think it does suck for certain guys because they were using that to make money, but at the same time, it's not really sustainable. And like, especially if you're trying to do that to help provide for your family, it's tough. It's like they don't build these big ass casinos out here in Las Vegas by giving money away. Like
Yeah,
that's not how it works.
degenerates built Vegas. That's what I
Yeah,
always say.
exactly.
So I have two more questions for you. One of the last weird ones. You are injured right now, but
Yes.
power slaps huge, and your injury is a lower body injury. Could you like, I'm not saying it's a possibility, but if you wanted to, if you called Dana and was like, I wanna be on power slap, do you think it's possible with the lower body injury, or would that still like strain it somehow, some way?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I could definitely. I looked at bare knuckle right away. I feel like I could bare knuckle. I mean, I could fight if I didn't have to. If I could kick and get kicked, I feel like I could still fight. So I feel like I could do bare knuckle even with my knee the way that it is, no problem. I mean, even with this knee, like I'm still able to walk around and move, and it just it's not real stable, and it's some pain. Um, I don't know if I would do the. I mean, I say that like if the UFC fired me and I needed money, I'd for sure power slap, or even do some kind of like freak show thing where like let me be a boy, but let me power slap fight like a 600-pound woman or something.
That's
Let's do a
hilarious.
or like
Yeah,
I want to do like a freak show fight. Like I want to fight Bob Sapp in MMA. Like I want to do something weird, or like I want to fight Gabby Garcia, that
that
big
would.
girl.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know who that is. There's this league called Fight Circus, and I've actually had one of their boxers on before. And Fight Circus does crazy shit like this. They have this guy that they call Blob Tang because he kind of looks like Rob Tang, but he's huge. He's fat. I could see you versus Blob Tang being an entertaining Scrabble.
well, the guy who got me in, like the first two guys that I watched fight, that I was like, oh, this is something I want to do, was Genki Sudo, and he did those. He fought he fought Butterbean, I think, and he's a little bitty Asian. And then Charles Crazy Horse Bennett, or formerly Charles Crazy Horse Bennett, Charles Felony Bennett. The first time I saw him fight, I was like, this is what I. Charles Bennett is the reason why I started fighting. I was like, I like this crazy guy. Like so, the freak show fights were something that interested me like early on, like watching little dudes fight giants. Like I always thought that was so cool, the no weight class stuff. So like it wasn't even UFC that got me into MMA. It was watching Genki Sudo and the freak show fights and seeing Charles Bennett like bite the head off a stuffed animal and shit. Like those was that's the entertainment type fighting that I want to do.
I always wanted Charles Bennett in the UFC. I know it was never gonna happen, but I was always like, bro. And then one thing Dana did that I loved was he brought Chris Barnett on, and Chris Barnett kind of comes from that scene a little bit. Like he's a
Yeah.
fat man that can do backflips and shit. And I was like, oh my god, we might be getting Charles Bennett, but it does not look like we'll ever be getting Charles Bennett in the UFC.
Man, if he was a young man again, I feel like he would be great. But again, I just like watching him. You can just tell he's a guy that likes
He's
to
so
fight
entertaining.
and he's entertaining, man. And that's what got me. I was like, oh, fighting is cool.
Absolutely. So now you got 9 months of healing to go through. What do you see next for you after the healing? Do you have any names that come to mind that you think will still be around in 9 months, or do you kind of just want to see how it goes and just look at the roster when you're there?
The crazy thing is like I didn't even know. I thought I was number 10, and then the other guys fight, and then I get a thing like, oh, you're ranked number 9. I'm like, how? I didn't. I just blew my knee out, and then I went up in the rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't really have my eyes set on anybody. Again, I told my manager after taking the notice fight with Sue and being like, hey man, look, like title run's probably a bust. Like I want to be the guy that can come in and fight short notice at 25 or 35, or I'm big enough. Like if it's a day notice and they need a 45, or like I'll be that guy. Like I want to be that guy, but it's hard to be that guy if you're ranked 9 in the world. They want other ranked guys want you. They want to keep. You know what I mean? There's like a little bit of a hierarchy there. They can't like if I'm ranked number 9 in the world, they're not going to let me fight a short notice fight 35
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a ranked athlete at flyweight. So for me, I'm hoping this time will put me out of the rankings, and then they can use me. Like let me be the dude. Like you need somebody to be in Vegas to fight at 45, but 45ers can't make it. Like I walk around at 155 pounds. Like I'll fight at 145. Like give me some money. Get me to Vegas. Like I want to be that guy. I want to be, you need a guy at flyweight. Like I might need 3 weeks to make weight at flyweight, but for 35 and 45, man, you could tell me the day of. I'll get on a plane and get my ass there. That's what I want to do, and I'm not able to do that, as a ranked flyweight. But I set this 9 months out, and then I'm out of the rankings. Nobody cares if I win or lose now. Uh, Let me be the guy that fights short notice. Like I only got 3 fights left on my contract. If like me being a short notice fill-in guy gets me beat up to the point to where I can't win, then they can fire me. Or if I'm putting on exciting fights and not winning and helping the company out being the short notice guy, then maybe they won't care that my record isn't the best because again, like I'm not gonna have this stellar record. I'm not Khabib, I'm just a dude who likes to fight and is lucky enough to have the best job in the world. So it helps me not being ranked to do my goals, which is to be active and fight fun, exciting fights, and not thinking too much about like, oh, if I beat this guy, then I'm gonna go here and I'll have to do this. Like, I hate that shit. I don't want to plan. Like, I want to fight on Saturday and then have the opportunity to maybe fight again at a different weight class next Saturday. And as a ranked flyweight, it's tough to do that. And I'm going to be coming out of that ranking soon, and I think that's I'm going to be able to fight the way that I really want to fight, which is go out there, be wild, have fun, not worry about rankings, not worry about title contention. I want to go out there and fucking put it all on the line, and then make some money and go drink a beer.
Hell yeah, you're a fucking badass, Tim Elliott. You got that dog in you, exactly what every MMA fighter should have. Do you want to tell the people where to follow you? I know you've been very active on social media the last couple days.
Yeah, on Twitter I'm at T Elliott 125, and on Instagram I'm at _awkward MMA.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for coming by, Tim. You're the man, the myth, the legend. We all love you. I love you. Thank you so much for coming by. New episodes every single Wednesday. I love y'all. I'll see y'all next week. Peace.